My parents kicked me out, sold my inheritance, and threw a party to celebrate retiring rich. So I crashed it and took back everything they stole. They always said I was a disappointment, the black sheep, the mistake. So when Grandpa passed and left me everything, they couldn't handle it. They forged papers, sold the beach house, and vanished with the money. A year later, they sent me a wedding-style invite to their retirement party. That's when I knew. They thought I was weak. So I showed up, not to beg, but to bury the perfect image they built. In one night, I destroyed their lies and made sure no one ever saw them the same again. I never thought a near-death experience would be the least painful thing I'd go through that year. But lying in the ICU, hooked up to machines and unable to speak, I had no idea my parents were already planning to betray me in a way I couldn't have imagined. It started with a car accident. I was hit by a drunk driver while coming home from work. I don't remember the crash. I don't even remember being rushed to the hospital. All I know is that I woke up 2 weeks later, dazed, confused, and unable to move properly. The doctors told me I'd been in a coma, that I was lucky to be alive. And at first, I believed that. My parents were there when I woke up. My mom cried and held my hand. My dad looked tired but relieved. They told me they'd been by my side the whole time, that they were just happy I made it. I didn't know then that every word they said was rehearsed. I stayed in the hospital for another 3 weeks. My recovery was slow, but steady. Every day, my parents visited, brought me snacks, laughed at my jokes. They talked about how life was short, about how things would be different now, that we'd be closer as a family. And stupidly, I believed them. It wasn't until I was discharged and went back to my small apartment that things started to feel off. My uncle, my grandfather's younger brother, came to visit. He was the kind of man who always smelled like old tobacco and wore the same beige jacket no matter the season. But he looked uneasy this time, nervous. He sat on my couch for 10 minutes before saying a word. Finally, he pulled out an envelope and handed it to me. Inside was a copy of my grandfather's will. I blinked. "Why are you showing me this?" He hesitated. "Because you were supposed to get the house." I froze. "What house?" He cleared his throat. "Your grandfather's beach house. The one in Cape Rock. He left it to you, not your parents. You." I didn't understand. My parents had never mentioned anything. Not when Grandpa died last year. Not when I was in the hospital. Never. I read through the will again. My name was there, clear as day. The house, the land, everything left to me. But here's the thing. That house was gone. Sold. My parents had told me a few months ago that the house was sold to pay off debts. That Grandpa's estate had nothing left. So why did this will say otherwise? My chest felt tight. I couldn't breathe properly. My uncle sat silently while I read the document over and over again. My hands were shaking. "Are you sure this is real?" I asked. He nodded. "It's notarized. Filed. I thought you already knew. Your parents told the family you agreed to sell it." That's when the first crack appeared. Because I never agreed to anything. I never signed anything. I was in a coma. And suddenly, everything about their hospital visits, their kindness, their weird small talk, it all started to feel like a mask. A mask hiding something much darker. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept pacing around my apartment, staring at the will, replaying every word my parents had said in the hospital. They told me everything would be okay, that we were family, that they were by my side every single day. But they never mentioned Grandpa's will, never mentioned the house, never even hinted at it. The next morning, I drove straight to the county records office. I requested a copy of the deed transfer for the Cape Rock property. The woman behind the desk clicked away on her computer, asked me for some ID, then printed a stack of papers. My hands were already sweating when I took them. There it was. The transfer of ownership. Grandpa's house had been sold 3 weeks after his death. Sold by power of attorney. The seller? My name. Except I never signed it. I never even knew I owned it. I looked closer at the signature. It was mine, or at least, it was supposed to be. But the J in my name curled the wrong way. The spacing was too perfect. It looked copied, almost traced. That's when the pit in my stomach turned into something sharper. Anger. I went home and pulled out every document I could find. Old letters. My real signature. I compared them, line by line. There was no doubt. The one on the house deed was a forgery. Someone had faked my signature to sell a house that legally belonged to me. And I knew exactly who had the access, the motive, and the guts to do it. My parents. I picked up the phone and called my dad. He answered after 2 rings, sounding cheerful. Hey, kiddo. How's recovery? I didn't waste time. Did you sell Grandpa's house? There was silence. A long, uncomfortable silence. Then he laughed. What? Where's this coming from? Answer the question, I said flatly. He paused again. Look, your mom and I thought it was best. There were bills. The property taxes were high. You weren't in any shape to deal with it. And you forged my signature, I snapped. You committed fraud. His tone shifted instantly. Watch your mouth. You have no idea what you're talking about. No, I said, because I've got a copy of the will, the deed transfer, and the fake signature you used. He didn't respond. I could hear him breathing, shallow and fast. Then he muttered, Don't do anything stupid. I hung up. I was shaking. I didn't know what to do first. Call the police, a lawyer, the news. All I knew was that the two people who raised me had stabbed me in the back while I was unconscious, and now they were trying to pretend like nothing happened. But this wasn't over. Not even close. Because if they thought I'd let it slide, they didn't know me at all. And I was about to make sure they regretted ever thinking I would. I didn't call them again after that. I couldn't. Every time I thought about their voices, their fake concern while I was lying in a hospital bed, I felt sick. Betrayal doesn't even begin to describe what I felt. It was like my entire childhood had been a lie. Like every memory I had of them, birthday parties, holidays, even just watching TV together, had been rewritten with a darker meaning. But I couldn't let emotions cloud what I needed to do next. So I got to work. I contacted a lawyer, someone who specialized in estate fraud. I sent him the will, the forged deed, everything I had. He called me the next day, and his tone was grim. This is serious, he said. Very serious. No kidding, I replied. The signature is clearly forged, he said. And if what you're saying about your medical condition is true, then you were incapacitated when the house was sold. That makes it even worse. What can I do? I asked. We'll file a civil suit first, he said. We'll try to get the property back. If the buyer was in on it, or if they bought it through shady means, we might be able to reverse the sale. If not, we go criminal. Against my parents? I asked quietly. Yes, he said. And if the court agrees, they could be charged with forgery, fraud, and theft. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. My hands were clenched so tightly my knuckles were white. I hated the idea of dragging this into court. I hated the idea of seeing them in a courtroom, pretending like they were the victims. But I hated what they did even more. The lawyer told me the process would take a few weeks. In the meantime, I decided to start digging deeper. I found out where the house had gone. It had been bought by a shell company, probably to hide the trail. But that shell company was connected to a realtor my parents had used before. Same office. Same signature on the transaction. It didn't take much to connect the dots. My parents had set the whole thing up. From the forged signature to the buyer to the quiet sale while I was still unconscious. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was determined. Then something strange happened. I got a text from my mother. It was short. Just 3 words. We need space. No explanation. No apology. Just those words. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. Because I had just received an invitation to something else. A party. A retirement celebration for my father. It was being held in a rented banquet hall. Catering. Music. Fancy dress. The whole family was invited. Except me. My name wasn't on the guest list. They had the nerve to throw a party to celebrate their new life. The life they built by stealing from me. And not even pretend I was part of it. But that was fine. They didn't invite me. I'd show up anyway. And I wouldn't be coming empty-handed. I stared at the invitation for a long time. It had been forwarded to me by my cousin Amanda, the only one in the family who still talked to me regularly. She wasn't even sure if she should send it, but she thought I deserved to know. I was glad she did. They were really doing it. My parents were hosting a full-blown retirement party. Catering, photographers, champagne fountains, the whole 9 yards. After selling my inheritance. After forging my name. After pretending like I didn't exist. And they had the audacity to throw it in our hometown, just 10 minutes away from the hospital I nearly died in. I was done playing quiet. I spent the next few days preparing. My lawyer gave me the go-ahead to gather documents, screenshots, and anything else I could use. We weren't ready for court yet, but I didn't need a judge to make people see what they had done. I just needed to show them the truth. I put together a folder, both physical and digital. Scans of the will. Copies of the forged signature. My hospital records showing the exact dates I was unconscious. I even printed out the realtor's connection to the shell company. Everything lined up. The timeline, the motive, the execution. It was all there. Amanda agreed to meet me before the party. She worked in event planning, and she had volunteered to help out at the venue. That gave her access, and it gave me a way in. When the day of the party came, I dressed in black. Not for mourning, for control, for power. I didn't want to look broken. I wanted to look like someone who knew exactly what had been taken from them and was ready to take it back. Amanda met me at the back entrance. She handed me a staff badge and whispered, "You're going to make a scene, aren't you?" I nodded. "Good," she said. "They deserve it." The hall was already filling with people when I slipped inside. Family friends, neighbors, co-workers from my dad's old office. They were all laughing, sipping wine, telling stories about how hard my parents had worked, how much they deserved this, how generous they were. If only they knew. I stayed near the back, watching. My mother floated around in a lavender gown, smiling like she was royalty. My dad clapped friends on the back, grinning like a man who had never done a thing wrong in his life. The speeches began. My dad took the microphone first, thanking everyone for coming. He talked about sacrifice, about building a legacy, about how proud he was of his family. That was the last lie he'd tell tonight. I stepped forward, my hands shaking slightly but my voice calm. "Sorry to interrupt," I said loudly. Heads turned. A few people gasped. My mother's face went pale. My father's smile froze. I walked toward the stage, holding up the folder. I thought everyone here should know the real reason this party is happening. It's not about retirement. It's about theft. My dad stepped forward, his voice tight. "You're not welcome here." "I noticed," I said, "but you'll want to hear this." And then I opened the folder, ready to ruin everything they had built on the foundation of their lies. The silence in the room was thick enough to choke on. I held the folder in one hand, the mic in the other, and took a deep breath. Everyone was staring, waiting, some confused, some already whispering. I opened the folder slowly, letting the tension build. Then I held up the first page, the copy of my grandfather's will. "This is the original will of my grandfather," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Filed, notarized, and legal. It clearly states that the Cape Rock property was left to me. Not my parents. Me." There were murmurs in the crowd. Someone in the back actually said, "Wait, what?" I moved on to the next page. "This," I said, "is the deed transfer for that property. Signed 3 weeks after my grandfather passed. It says I agreed to sell the house. But I didn't. Because I couldn't." I paused, making sure every eye was on me. I was in a coma. From a car accident. Hooked up to machines in the ICU. I couldn't walk, couldn't speak, couldn't sign anything. Gasps. I held up the next document. "This is my medical record, confirming I was unconscious during the exact dates this signature was filed. And this," I held up the forged deed, "is not my signature. It's a forgery, and my parents used it to sell the property behind my back. They sold my inheritance. While I was fighting for my life." My mom finally moved. She stepped forward, eyes wide, voice shaking. "You're confused," she said. "Sweetheart, this isn't the place." "Don't call me that," I said, turning to face her. "You lied to me. You visited me in the hospital every day, looked me in the eye, and said everything was going to be okay. Meanwhile, you were cashing out my future." My dad stepped up beside her, jaw clenched. "You're embarrassing yourself," he said. "This is a family matter. You're sick. You need help." That made me laugh. "I needed help," I said, "when I was unconscious. And instead of helping me, you robbed me. You stole a house that was supposed to be mine and threw this party with the money." I turned back to the crowd. They didn't invite me here because they knew I'd ruin it. Because deep down, they know what they did was wrong. More murmurs. Some people were shaking their heads. Others looked stunned. Amanda stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching my parents crumble in real time. "I've already contacted a lawyer," I continued. "There's going to be a civil suit. And possibly criminal charges. I just thought everyone here deserved to know exactly who you're celebrating tonight." I dropped the mic on the table and stepped down from the stage. My parents stood frozen, pale, silent. The party was over, but I was just getting started. I walked out of that banquet hall with my heart racing. Not from fear, but from release. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. Like I wasn't carrying this storm alone anymore. My truth was finally out. And my parents? They looked like they'd been hit by a truck. Amanda caught up with me in the parking lot. She was grinning. You just blew up their whole life, she said. Yeah, I muttered. But it doesn't bring the house back. Maybe not yet, she said. But it's not over. And she was right. The fallout started the very next day. Family members who had been distant started calling. Some were angry, demanding to know if what I said was true. Others were quiet, ashamed they hadn't noticed anything sooner. My parents, who had always prided themselves on their spotless image, were suddenly radioactive. Word spread fast. My confrontation had been recorded by multiple people. The video hit social media within hours. But I wasn't watching views. I was working. My lawyer filed the official lawsuit. He had everything he needed: the will, the deed, the forged signature, my hospital records, even the party footage. It painted a clear picture. They didn't just steal. They celebrated it. I heard nothing from my parents. Not a word. Until 2 weeks later, when I received a letter. No envelope. Just a folded page slipped under my apartment door. It was from my mother. She didn't apologize. She didn't admit anything. It was just a stream of blame. How I had humiliated them. How I'd blown things out of proportion. How I'd ruined the family name. I tore it in half without finishing it. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were sorry they got caught. The court date was set. The buyer of the house, a faceless LLC, was subpoenaed. My lawyer suspected they'd flip quickly, not wanting to be tied to fraud. And he was right. Within days, the buyer's legal team contacted us, offering a deal. They'd reverse the sale. No fight. No delay. They just wanted to walk away. It was a win. But it wasn't the end. Because once the house was back in my name, I did something they never saw coming. The house was mine again. It took nearly 4 months of paperwork, legal back and forth, and gut-wrenching tension, but it happened. The property was transferred back into my name. The forged documents were nullified. The shell company backed off completely, just like my lawyer predicted. They didn't want trouble, they wanted out. The beach house stood exactly as I remembered it. Worn shutters. Faded paint. That little squeaky gate that led to the porch. It needed work, but it was still standing. Still mine. I drove out there the day the paperwork was finalized and stood in front of it, just breathing in the salt air. This wasn't just a house anymore. It was proof. Proof that they didn't win. But I wasn't done yet. My lawyer filed an additional claim. One that named my parents directly: fraud, identity theft, emotional distress. And this time, there were criminal implications. We weren't just trying to fix what they did. We were holding them accountable for it. That's when the letters started again. First from my mom. Then my dad. This time they weren't angry. They were scared. They begged. Said they didn't know what they were doing. Said they were just trying to protect me. That grandpa never wanted me to have the house anyway. That they thought it would be easier if they handled it themselves. I didn't reply, because I remembered the party. The smug smiles. The way they celebrated on the ashes of what they took from me. There had been no hesitation when they signed my name. No guilt when they popped champagne. No pause when they erased me from the guest list. They made their choices. Now they could live with them. Court day came fast. I walked into that courtroom alone, but I didn't feel alone. My lawyer was by my side. Amanda sat in the front row. Even my uncle, the one who gave me the will in the first place, was there. My parents looked smaller. Not physically, just reduced. Like they had shrunk under the weight of being seen for who they really were. They didn't look at me when I walked in. Not once. The judge asked the usual questions. The lawyers made their statements. And when it came time for me to speak, I stood tall and told the truth. Every painful, ugly part of it. The betrayal. The forgery. The coma. The lies. And when I finished, I looked directly at them and said, "You raised me to believe that family always protects each other. That blood means something. But the moment I couldn't defend myself, you used that as a chance to steal from me. You didn't just take a house. You took my trust, my dignity, and now you want forgiveness without consequences." They had nothing to say, because what could they say? The judge didn't rule that day, but I didn't need a gavel to feel victorious. I already had everything they tried to take from me, and more. The official ruling came 2 weeks later. The judge declared the sale fraudulent and the signature forged, which meant not only was the house legally mine again, but my parents were also held personally liable. They were ordered to pay damages, both financial and emotional. And while they avoided jail time by agreeing to a settlement, the stain of that judgment followed them like a shadow. Their retirement dreams? Gone. The savings they'd hidden away? Seized to cover legal fees and restitution. They lost everything they tried to build on the back of their betrayal. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even speak to them after the ruling. I walked out of the courtroom, calm and steady, and never looked back. For a while, I kept expecting them to try again. Another letter. Another desperate message. But it never came. They went quiet. Maybe they were ashamed. Or maybe they were just too busy cleaning up the mess they created. I spent the next few months restoring the beach house. Not just physically, but emotionally. It had always been Grandpa's pride. A quiet place by the water where he used to take me fishing or tell stories on the porch swing. He believed in peace, in honesty, in family that showed up when it mattered. And in the end, his belief in me was what saved me. Amanda helped with the renovations. So did my uncle. It became a place where I started to feel whole again. Not just because I got the house back, but because I reclaimed my sense of self. People talk a lot about justice like it's some grand, dramatic moment. But sometimes, justice is quiet. It's the silence after the storm, when you're still standing and they're not. It's the knowledge that you didn't have to scream to be heard. That truth, eventually, speaks loud enough on its own. I started getting calls from family again. Cousins who had watched the courtroom updates. Neighbors who had seen the viral video. They apologized. Said they believed me. Said they were sorry for not seeing the truth sooner. I didn't hold grudges. But I didn't forget either. Forgiveness, to me, doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. It means accepting it happened and choosing to heal anyway. And I was healing, one wave at a time. A year later, I hosted a small gathering at the beach house. Nothing fancy, just people who mattered. Amanda, my uncle, a few close friends. We grilled food, played old music, and watched the sun melt into the ocean like it always used to when I was a kid. At one point, I stood alone on the porch, the same spot where Grandpa used to sit, humming to himself while the wind played with his white hair. I imagined him there beside me. Not proud because I'd won. Proud because I stood my ground. Because I didn't let anger turn me into someone I wasn't. The house wasn't just wood and paint. It was proof that I could survive betrayal. That I could take something broken, like a family name, and build something honest from it. I still got the occasional letter from my parents' lawyer. Small things. Requests. Updates. I never responded. I didn't need to. They had made their choice. And I had made mine. I kept the nameplate Grandpa carved years ago, with both our initials. I nailed it back on the porch beam where it always belonged. A small symbol, maybe. But to me, it meant everything. It meant I hadn't just inherited a house. I'd inherited strength. Integrity. A legacy no one could steal. And as the waves crashed gently in the distance and laughter filled the rooms behind me, I finally let go of everything that had hurt. Not out of weakness, but because I didn't need it anymore. I had something better. Peace. They thought they could erase me. They thought money and lies would bury the truth forever. But I reminded them, I don't need a family that treats love like a transaction. I needed closure. And I got it. If this story hit you deep, or if you've ever been betrayed by the ones you trusted most, drop a comment. I want to hear your story. Hit that like button if you stayed till the end. And subscribe, because we're just getting started. I have more stories, real, raw, and revenge-worthy. And trust me, the next one, it cuts even deeper.